Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to Kottabos Space Program, where today we are having a look at another wonderful mod, this time in the form of Tundra Exploration, which is being made by forum user Taigu7, and what this glorious little parts pack looks to add into the game is a selection of rocket and probe parts based off of real-world spacecraft, and I just love that. Essentially, what the goal of this mod is to take real-world crafts like the Dragon V2 and the Falcon 9 and Kerbalize them into stock-alike parts. And I love that. You may know, if you've watched me for a while, I'm a sucker for a stock-alike parts pack, and so having stock-alike versions of real-world crafts just makes me happy. So let's just jump right on into the VAB and take a look at what all parts this does add into the game. And as always, let's grab a Mark 1 command pod for size comparison's sake. And one thing, we're going to do a bit differently today. Normally, I go through all the command pods, then all the fuel tanks, etc., down the list of categories. But today, we're going to go a little bit differently because in this parts pack, as I mentioned, it takes real-world craft and Kerbalizes them. And at the moment, there are 3 separate Kerbalized crafts. You have the Dragon V2 and the Falcon 9 that I mentioned, but also the Lady, which was a probe sent to the moon a couple of years ago. Oh god, can I remember what the acronym stands for? Lunar Atmosphere and Dust Environment Explorer, I believe, was the name of the probe, and that is the first one we're going to look at because I quite like this little thing, and it is indeed a little thing. It starts off with the Staub control block. Now, of course, they've also changed the name of all of these ships, so the Lady is turned into the Staub, the Dragon V2 has been turned into the Rodan that we have here, but we'll get onto that more later. But yes, first, the Staub control block. Very, very tiny little robotic probe core, built-in, command functions, of course, reaction wheel, SAS, a small little 10 electrical charge battery, but what's quite fun and unique about this is the solar panels that go all the way around. I really, really do love the look of this thing. It is just gorgeous, and of course with all those solar panels, you can pretty much bet you're not going to have any troubles with electricity on the way to your mission, so that is quite cool. A fun little control block. Now let's put it off to the side here and look at the next of the 3 parts for this little probe, and that is, of course, the Staub fuel tank. Now once again, it is covered in solar panels, so you really don't need to worry about electricity on this mission. And inside of the fuel tank, it holds 54 liquid fuel, 66 oxidizer, and 50 monopropellant. And no electrical charge, I don't believe. Let's just double check that. Yes, but of course, does have the solar panels and produces 5 electrical charge per second. So yeah, you'll be fine on electricity for this tiny little probe. And now the last part that makes up this Staub probe here is the 455K orbital control system. And this is a really cool tiny little engine block here, which does have a main engine as well as 2 monopropellant powered RCS engines on either side, so you can get some real nice good control out of this thing and have both your normal fuel burning engine, or liquid fuel and oxidizer rather, as well as the maneuvering RCS. Very handy, and because of its tiny size, it sips fuel at 0.5 liquid fuel per second and 0.6 oxidizer, and has a very tiny atmospheric thrust of 13.7 and a still equally as tiny vacuum thrust of 16. So not exactly the most powerful engine on the block, but you know what? It's a pretty nice thing for a probe, and these 3 parts, essentially give you a fully built probe that you could potentially build multiples of these, attach them to other rockets, and send them out into the stars. It would be quite entertaining indeed. But yes, that's everything for the Staub, so let's look at the parts that have been added in for the Rodan. Now that means going back to the control pods and taking a look at this Rodan command pod, which let's zoom out a little bit here. We're going to need it because this thing's huge. Boom. Compare that to the Mark 1. That is a big probe. And it's gorgeous. Now, unfortunately, I'll say this right off the bat, it does not have an internal view yet. In fact, it's actually kind of creepy if you do go into the internal view, because rather than sitting in like a makeshift or temporary cockpit, your Kerbals are literally sitting in the blackened void of nothingness. It's kind of strange, but yeah, so just fly it from the external view for now. And as for all of its functions, it is a 1-person minimum, of course, 5 crew capacity total. It does have its own built-in engines, which are powered by monopropellant, but they are like proper, powerful engines. They aren't just RCS maneuvering, which is quite interesting. It does, of course, have a built-in RCS system, as well as reaction wheel, crew report, electrical charge, and 1,000 monopropellant. All pretty standard fare for a command pod, but what's quite fun about this, you may notice we've got the rounded dome on the top, which isn't good if you need a parachute, but you can open that up. Pops right open like a can. It's great. So you can put a docking port here if you're just taking this baby to space and it will never return, or you can put a parachute in there, whatever you need. It's quite a cool little thing. I quite enjoy that. It's fun. And now the next part that we have for this is the Pika K Advanced Heat Shield, which is designed to go. Oh god, let's open the shroud. Pop this thing on the bottom here. Then grab the heat shield. There we go, beautiful. So we have this beautiful little heat shield here to protect it from, well, heat. But the fun part about it, it's also gears. There we go, the lovely little landing gears pop out. And like I said, this command pod does have its own very useful and powerful monopropellant engines, so this thing is basically its own built-in lander, which is quite cool and quite convenient. And I also just noticed how nicely the Mark I command pod fits there. If only it would fit under the shroud, that'd be hilarious. But oh well, what are you gonna do? And yes, that is the heat shield. It is, well, a heat shield. It's good for 800 ablator, so we should be good on any heat damage to keep it safe, which is quite nice. And then the next part that we have for this, actually, no, it's oddly in utility, I believe. Yes, here we go. The RVS-42 Unpressurized Cargo Trunk. Now, this thing's made to go down here and has a whole wall of solar panels on this side, holds a whole crap load of electrical charge, and is also its own built-in decoupler, so you can change the decoupler force right there. But if we go and take a look at it, the curved solar panel, 30 electric charge per second, the decoupler has an ejection force of 50, and this baby holds 120 electrical charge. Honestly, it seems like quite a low number for the size of this thing. I would like to see that number bumped up, or alternatively, this thing given like liquid fuel and oxidizer storage instead. But I do like the built-in solar panels. Always nice to see that, so you have one less thing to worry about while you're flying around the solar system. But yes, those are the current 3 parts that we have for the Rodan system, which is based off of the Dragon V2. And so let's move on to the last section of parts, which is the Ghidorah 9 parts, which are all based off of the Falcon 9. And what in the... oh, no, that's actually something on my screen. Hold on a moment. I thought that there was something right here up in the air, but no, that was a smudge on my screen. Glorious, lovely, beautiful. So, the first part for the Ghidorah 9, once again based off of the Falcon 9, doesn't have its own command pod, so use whatever command pod you would like for it. But the first bit that we have is a fuel tank, the Ghidorah K281 tank, which is pretty freaking massive. Look at the size of that thing. Has a liquid fuel capacity of 2,160, oxidizer capacity of 2,640, and, well, it's just a big tank. Not exactly the most impressive of looking things, but then again, it is a fuel tank. Not really a whole lot to him. It's a cylinder, and that's that, really. Now, we also do have another, much larger fuel tank. Let's actually zoom all the way out for this baby. Oh, look at the size of that. Oh, let's actually raise this up a bit. There we go. And pop that down. Look at how freaking huge this thing is, going from here all the way down to here, and it holds a whopping 8,920 liquid fuel and 11,000 oxidizer. huge amount of fuel, and in a very, very long craft, or a long fuel tank, rather. Again, not exactly the most impressive of modeling, but once more, it's a fuel tank, not exactly, you know, what you'd stress your artistic talent on, so understandable. Now, after this, we do have a couple of engines. Let's actually take off the gigantic tank, because, well, it's overly gigantic, and head down to this one, and in the engine tab, we have two added in. The first of which we'll take a look at is the VL9R Octopus, and this is a glorious-looking engine. Just look at all those engine ports. It's beautiful. I really do love this thing. But yes, the engine itself, let's look at its stats here, does have an alternator, of course, to produce electrical power, and then does produce quite a lot of thrust. Now, we do have gimbling on it, electrical charge, etc., the usual. Whoops, accident. I always do that. I always click off of that damn thing. And produces quite a large amount of thrust here with 850 atmospheric thrust and 925 vacuum thrust, while using liquid fuel at 27.3 per second and 33 oxidizer per second, roughly. And we do have an alternate mode on this thing. You can switch back and forth between it. You have the automatic switching here or manual switching. And the secondary mode on this baby produces a 2,298 atmospheric thrust, 2,500 vacuum thrust, and consumes a heck of a lot more liquid fuel at 74 per second, and roughly 90 per second oxidizer. So quite cool. It's essentially a two-stage engine here. Just, you know, start off with a really high up stage, and then, you know, as you're getting higher, go down to the lower stage, perhaps, etc. But cool. Let's drop that and look at the next engine, the RU-1K Marlin vacuum engine. And by the name, one would assume that this is good in vacuum rather than in atmosphere. But yes, a nice looking engine there. Again, kind of simplistic as many of the parts in here, but overall very nice looking. Alternator, electrical charge, gimbling, all that jazz. But as for the engine stats, thrust of atmospheric 160, vacuum 650. And engine ISP is quite important on this one because, of course, in atmosphere 85, but in vacuum 345, so you get a lot more bang for your buck using this baby up in space. And it uses a pretty decent amount of fuel here. It's 17 roughly per second max on the liquid fuel and 21 roughly per second max on the oxidizer. But overall, a good, nice little quality engine. So, let's take a look at some of these things. Now, first off, I'm actually going to just grab this command pod, and we'll throw on real quick its heat shield as well. Have the, there we go, have the gears down by default, and we'll go and show off the really cool engine for this thing, and head out to the launch pad where you can see it. And we'll also take a look at the ungodly void that is the IVA. If we just go to Jebediah on the internal view, you can see we are in the blackest of the void, but if we look down, we can't see ourselves, but we can see no other Kerbals. Hopefully, there will be an IVA added in here soon. It is planned, it just hasn't happened yet. So I can't wait to see what it looks like once it does get made. But yes, for now, best to fly it from the exterior. And let's put it full throttle, and you'll see how powerful these monopropellant-only engines are. And 3, 2, 1, blast off! There we go. We accelerate quite quickly on this thing and fly up pretty well. Quite honestly, if you're a good enough pilot, you might actually be able to get this thing as a single stage to orbit. I think it's a little bit overpowered right now. Flying straight up, we should get to about 75,000 meters, which, I mean, technically, if you did it right, you might be able to get an orbit out of this thing. But only maybe. Only maybe. So let's take a look at the map. And actually, we got up to 80,000 meters on this one. Now, I honestly do doubt that someone could get this thing all the way into orbit on just its own lonesome self, but quite frankly, with even one smaller stage added to it, it probably could, and would make for quite a useful lander on other planets with how powerful that little engine is. That is quite nice, but let's revert back to the vehicle assembly building and quickly build ourselves a little Staub. Let's grab this little tank. And then lastly, it's just such a cute little engine. Look at that thing. And let's go launch it from the launch pad here. I almost called it a control pad. That doesn't make sense even in the slightest. But okay, let's zoom in because of course it is tiny. But it's so cute. Look at it. Let's launch. There we go. Not a very powerful engine, but again, this thing is meant to be well, in real life, it was a lunar probe. It, kept orbiting around the moon for a while, doing tests, and eventually, I think, crashed into the moon intentionally. It was part of the experiment. I don't remember 100%, though. I'm going to have to look that up after I do this film. But as you can see, really sipping down the fuel. A very efficient engine that you could really get a whole lot of good use out of this thing. It is a fun, beautiful little probe. I do like this thing. And, of course, all the solar panels. Just so much electricity you can produce with this thing. It's glorious. And we've been actually flying for a good amount of time here, and we're not even down to 50% fuel on this baby. So it is a very, very cool little rocket. Now, that's enough of that one, though. Not really much to that small probe. Let's actually load up a pre-made file that thankfully the mod maker gives you, creating a Ghidorah 9, which once again is based off the Falcon 9, because this thing's a big rocket. Oh, and I actually forgot to look at one of the parts for it, which I just remembered are down here. There are also lander legs. Let's actually go to utility where we can find these things, and you can see them here, but they're these very large blade-looking things, and they are pretty impressive. You can deploy them here, and they create lander legs. And there is also another part that I've just realized I forgot. I'm glad we loaded up this Ghidorah 9, so yes, we have these nice landing legs, and for this pre-made craft, you can see that they have the 4 going around, so you can land this thing quite nicely, hopefully. And if we go up, we also have these little grid fins, which of course are in aerodynamics. You can find them on page 2, at least on my sorting, and you just kind of clip them onto the rocket somewhere. I kind of have it in an odd way there right now, but they are, well, they're aerodynamic fins that can help you control pitch and yaw, and you can click them out so that they do sort of fold outwards a bit to give you more control. Quite cool, quite useful little parts. I can actually see myself using these on other small craft that I like to make. For a large craft, again, I know this is based on the Falcon 9, so that's a thing, but I just think it looks weird on here for Kerbal version of things. But yes, a very cool little part. Lifting rating of 0.38 on the aero surface on each of these. Very nice indeed. And as for those landing legs, they do have quite a nice crash tolerance at, of course, 12 meters per second. So let's just go and launch this Ghidorah 9, which they put, they did put the Dragon V2 up top here. Very cool indeed. And let's launch. See if this thing works. See what it can do. Alrighty. So let's load up here. I'm glad we went to load this up, or I might have forgotten those landing legs and grid fins there. That would have been horrible. Alright, let's deploy these so we have some nice control. Turn on our SAS, and just, dear sweet Jebediah, look at how big this rocket is. It's insane. I love it. It's great. With my luck, though, it's going to be too top-heavy, and we're going to tip over and die. But let's throttle up and launch in 3, 2, 1. Blast off. Oh, yes, those. I should have put them on the first stage. I always like having them release when I start up the engines. But yes, there we go. A beautiful, beautiful, very, very tall rocket. What stage are we on right now with this engine? Let's go to toggle mode. There we go. Yeah, we'll go with that one. Bigger flame, more fun. And yes, this is the Ghidorah 9. You can see all the lovely parts to it. Let's actually stage this thing to see the next engine, which of course is a vacuum engine, so it's not going to do jack for this. But let's also actually deploy the lander legs. Probably would have been better to actually do that instead. But yes, there we go. We do, in fact, have 3 of the 4 legs, since I accidentally manually deployed that one. Bam, so you could try and attempt to land this craft, which would be quite cool. But, of course, we're going to drop this stage and start the vacuum engine, which is insane to do in atmosphere. By lower stage, you're going to explode. And yes, as you can see, this thing is doing nothing because it's not designed for flying here. And, of course, since we do have the Rodan command pod up top there, we can, of course, do this and fly away. Hold on, yep, there we go. We can fly away now. Beautiful, beautiful times. But yes, that's really it for this mod. Not really much else I can show you here. So, if you would like to download this mod pack for yourself, which I would definitely suggest you do, you can follow the link in the description as always. And yeah, if you do give it a download and make some interesting crafts, I would love to see them, so tweet me some pictures. And yes, I hope you do have enjoyed this video today, and of course that you come back for the next, when of course we will be looking at yet another wonderful mod. But until then, thank you for watching, my friends, and as always, have a good one. This thing doesn't have a parachute on it, does it? What's inside the shroud? Nothing. Yep, these Kerbals are dead. Happens. Later, folks.